get physical. Let's get physical.
Roger,
what's body talk? I'm looking forward to this one, Ronnie. Squats and all that. Look at this.
What's that you're wearing? No, Roger, no, you got it wrong. It's not. You got the wrong end of the stick, or you got the wrong end of the dumbbell, or whatever. No, you're wrongly dressed. I'm properly dressed for this.
You said squats and stuff.
Squats, yeah, but there's two different types of squats, isn't there? And you've got the wrong one.
Oh, right.
So you're going to have to switch to the right one, aren't you? And take off your exercise gear.
Well, luckily, Ronnie, I did put together a PowerPoint about squatting, so I suppose that'll save us a little bit.
That'll save you if you've done that, definitely.
So we've got two themes really then. So we've got squatting in the non-exercise sense, and one other, right?
Well, yes, and the exercise, the squats isn't maybe what people thought. It doesn't seem to be a little bit like what you thought either, Roger. In that,
you see that from Deb. Hello, Deb.
She loves that look.
You're only probably the only one on the internet.
At least someone loves it, Roger. At least one person does in the world.
I know.
So anyway, but we've got to talk about a very good vegan person who's very sadly recently passed away.
Oh yes, indeed. Yeah, thanks for reminding me. Yeah, it's we got the sad news about 3 days ago that the first professional vegan footballer, Neil Robinson, has sadly died. He played for Everton and Swansea, and then a couple of other things. But he was most proud about Everton because it was his kind of boyhood team, and in fact, it's said that he was the closest person who played for them to live near Goodison Park. So he was very kind of proud about that, you know. And in particular, there's a picture of him tackling Kenny Dalglish, who is a famous Liverpool player, and he was extremely proud about that. He used to say there was two teams in Liverpool, Everton and Everton Reserves.
Yeah, yes, I've heard that one before.
Yeah,
and hopefully people that aren't in the UK will understand what the hell we're going on about here.
Well, yeah, maybe
with
not.
With the soccer, which is like a kind of big thing at the moment, although kind of a lot of people boycotting it for very good reasons. Yeah, it's a great advert for veganism to have a vegan professional footballer and a very good footballer at that. Great advert for veganism. Neil died of a heart attack. I think he was 65, wasn't he, Roger? 65?
Yeah, he was born the same year as me, yeah.
And some people are going to think, oh, well, you know, that's, you know, he hasn't lived very long as a vegan. What people need to understand, it was actually veganism that kept Neil alive for so long, I'm sure, because he discovered he had a congenital heart problem. It was dangerous for him to consume fat. And so the vegan diet actually, you know, kept him going for so many years.
Well, I didn't know that. Because, I mean, yes. I'd met Neil at various veg fests, including the East Midlands Vegan Festival, and he gave a talk about cooking without oil. So that sits in, yeah.
Yeah, and that's why. And so even within his vegan diet, he had a low oil. I mean, I don't think he ate nuts and seeds. You know, gets protein from pulses and that kind of thing. You know, because of that. So he actually lived to the age he did live to because of his veganism. And I think that's an important thing to remember, or certainly because of adopting the vegan diet that he did.
Yeah, because he called it plant exclusive, didn't he?
Yes, I believe he did. Yes.
Yeah, so he didn't say plant-based diet. He said plant-exclusive diet, which was, you know, part of the philosophy of veganism. So yes, I think his website, Peaceful Planet, is still up, I think. But he was planning a new one. As far as I know, Tim Barford, the manager of VegFest, is putting together a tribute. So that's all I know so far. I mean, it only happened about 3 or 4 days ago, I think. It was Everton Football Club that broke the news, actually.
Yes, yeah. And of course, we've got more soccer players now, gradually more soccer players now becoming vegan. And we have a football club here in England, Forest Green Rovers, who, although the footballers aren't themselves, I think most of them aren't actually vegan. They do, on a match day, they consume vegan food, and the club itself is entirely vegan in terms of the food that it serves to the spectators.
Aren't all the lights on wind power and that kind of stuff as well? Yeah.
Yeah, and the pitch is like organic and everything. Unfortunately, they're not doing too well in the.
Is the pitch grass fed?
I'm not sure. I know it's cut a lot veganically maintained. The pitch, and they're eco-friendly in all sorts of ways, and it's a really great example to other sports clubs what they're doing. Unfortunately, they're not doing too well in the league that they're in this season. Hopefully, their performances will improve, because obviously it's a good advert for veganism if they do well, and they're just about the only soccer team that I support for that reason.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we did want to start off with that little tribute because it's important. And we both knew Neil, although I don't think we were best buddies or anything, but we both knew Neil. There is a podcast that I've got, which I can send to people if they want, where he's calling me his hero and I'm calling him my hero. So that was a bit weird. It's a bit of a love-in. Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, well, on to the since I can't do my dumbbells, I suppose we better do this. Other thing that you've got in mind, then, Ronnie.
Well, yes, because that's a squat as well, isn't it?
It's a kind of alternative shop in Liverpool, news from nowhere. It was very famous, but the local group had a squat shop across the road from it. A kind of dropping centre, and I think it was a bit of a cafe. People could, go and have some lunch and get coffee and all that. Although inside news from nowhere, they also was one of these. It was very kind of hippie trippy in the sense that you had just a table and it had a kettle and barley cup and tea, various teas and everything, and you just made yourself a cup of tea as you were, so you could then walk around the shop, drinking that while you're doing it, and you just put in a donation. It was that kind of thing. So this is part of the squatting scene in Liverpool. Of course, that's one thing that people don't know about us, I suppose, Ronnie, is the fact that we're both being involved with the squat scene on some level, yeah.
We were, yes, definitely. I mean, when I came out of prison the first time, which would have been in '76, I kind of moved to London. I went to live in a squat. When I lived in Luton before I got arrested and everything, I knew a couple of people that ran a left wing bookshop in Luton, and then while I was in prison, they moved to London. And they set up a squat in an area of North London called Crouch End. And they had also in another part of North London on the Archway Road, they had a squatted bookshop. So they had a house that was a squat, and they opened up a squat that was in a row of shops to use as a bookshop, to kind of move their bookshop to. And so when I kind of came out of jail, because I'd kind of done a carpentry course while I was on that prison sentence, I was able to help them with, some of the carpentry to get their bookshop up and running. And I did just help in the bookshop as well occasionally. And the squat where we lived in Crouch End, it was very well organised. There was a rota, for the cooking and cleaning and everything. And virtually all the meals were vegan, because it was a mixture of vegans, vegetarians, and there was like one or two people that ate meat. But we kind of had this unwritten rule that all the meals would be vegan so that everyone could eat them. And we all took turns. It was mostly stir fries, actually, from what I remember, that we used to cook.
Right. It would have been in those days, I suppose.
Yeah. And we also opened up other squats. And what had happened was, loads of houses in this street, it was called Nelson Road, had been bought by a housing company. And they bought a load of them. And then over time, they were gradually kind of doing them up, renovating them and going to sell them for, probably a big profit or whatever. And I think some of them are going to be social housing as well. But it was taking them ages to get around to doing them all, you see. So of course, it was an opportunity to squat the places.
Squat the place. Now, before you go on, Ronnie, we've got two questions about the word, because I don't know whether this is a UK only type thing. I mean, we've got Colleen saying why call squats, because in some ways you could even think, because squatters say squat, whereas you could you could read it as a pejorative, couldn't you? Oh, you're squatting.
Kind of. It was like a radical occupation, really. I suppose, in terms of occupying somewhere.
And Deb said, does it mean rent free? It means everything free, really.
Yes, it normally would do. It normally would mean. I mean, we came to an agreement, you see, with this housing, and it's interesting. The housing company was a company called London and Quadrant, and what's interesting about them is that the most prestigious greyhound track in the UK is a place called Walthamstow Stadium, and it's actually due to London Quadrant that they played a major part in that stadium closing, because they actually bought it to use for housing, and it meant the end of dog racing there. So they did a good thing in that respect, and a lot of their stuff is kind of social housing anyway. Going back to the squatting, we came to an agreement with them that they wouldn't try and evict us until it was really close to the time when they needed to renovate the property. So it made people feel safe that they weren't going to be served an eviction notice at any moment. And some of the squats, were maintained for 2 or 3 years. People were able to live there for a reasonable length of time before the company needed to move in and renovate the place. And I was the guy. I was the kind of breaking in guy, because we started a housing cooperative where we would house homeless people. We would open up squats in this road for homeless people where they could move in. And I was the guy, because I had a load of tools and I had a bit of carpentry experience in that. I was the guy that used to break into the places, you see. I used to go and kind of cut the lock out the door or get in the window or something.
It's just you could get through the keyhole, isn't it, Ronnie?
I used to because I'm so little, that's why I used to slide under the crack under the door. And I was the guy that used to do that. I'd be there in my overalls with my toolkit and getting in the place. And anyway, one day I was breaking into this place, and a woman who lived somewhere else in the road came up to me and said, "Oh, yeah, what are you doing? What are you doing? Are you one of those bloody squatters? I'll tell the council." And I said, no need to do that. I said, "I'm from the council." I told her I was from the council. I said, "I'm from the council, and we're kind of opening up this house because a homeless woman's going to come and live here, you see." And the woman said, "Oh, right. Oh, well, that's all right then." And then she was moaning about the squatters. I said, "Well, out of the council," I said, "we actually like the squatters." I said, "We like the squatters because," I said, because if houses are left empty, they're liable to be vandalised. But if people are living in those houses, they won't be vandalised. So it's actually better for the properties.
Yeah, it's actually true.
Living in them, you see. And she said, "Oh, I never thought of that." You see. So anyway,
I know. In Liverpool, and the neighbours says thank you to the squatters because they cleaned up all the garden, which was an eyesight, and they'd sort it out. And then of course that means that people are not breaking into, drink beer and throw things around and have parties and stuff. And so in that sense, squatting is kind of fairly kind of socially responsible thing to do in a weird kind of way.
I've known different sorts of squats. I mean, that one where we were, and some of the other ones in the street that I knew of were very well organised. And very well maintained.
There's different types, isn't it? It depends on who you've got and
who's in there. And I've known other ones that were like.
Do you want to deal with this one, Ronnie? Nella is asking, do the police get in and violently arrest squatters?
I think they would these days because the law's changed.
It depends. It's kind of a case by case, though, isn't it? But the real ones who are most violent are the thugs that the owners hire rather than the cops. Mm. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think because this was like a kind of housing company that was kind of where they were quite into kind of social housing and stuff. I think they were kind of more sympathetic to us, and it made it easier for us, and we were able to come to an agreement with them and stuff like that. Whereas, in some places, if there was a really nasty landlord that owned the place. I mean, no place.
We're going to talk about damage in a bit, but there was the same one that I was talking about. The people brought some thugs in, and they smashed their own place up to make it inhabitable.
they'd sooner smash the place up.
And then left it for another 2.5 years.
Yeah. You see, we have a housing problem. There's probably a housing problem in every country in the world, but certainly here in the UK, it's a housing problem. There's loads of places that are unoccupied because they're privately owned. You see, what happened? Landlords buy these places and just leave them empty, because they work out that somehow that's in their best interest to leave them empty, in the best interest of like making a profit sometime in the future or whatever. I think that those places should be taken off them. They should be appropriated by the authorities, probably by the local authority, and rented out to people. I don't agree with private letting. I think all rented property, pretty much should be publicly owned and publicly rented out to people. I think it's disgraceful that a basic human need like housing should be used to make people a profit. And I think all housing actually
it's a ridiculous thing. I mean, social housing is obviously the key.
Ideally, all housing would be publicly owned, because I think anything that's a basic human need, you've got housing, you've got energy, you've got healthcare, you've got food, and all these things that's a basic human need for survival should not be in the private sector. That these things should all be publicly owned, because they're things that should not be the subject of profit. And it's like the drug companies, making huge profits. They should all be drawn into public ownership.
Yeah, well, if the drug companies really meant what they said about, we're really concerned about human health and everything, that would be the kind of, not a nationalized thing, it would be a globalized ththing, where all of them just pool their information. Which absolutely.
This is the thing; those things that are vital for, energies another thing, isn't it? It should be publicly owned. No one should have to, we're going to have people die this winter because they can't afford to pay the fuel bills. That was publicly owned. You could say, right, we'd make this affordable to everyone. It's publicly owned. No one's in this to make a profit. Because what happened
I'm going to crack on, Ronnie, if that's
all
right.
Yeah. Because I'm
okay. So it was.
I'm going on now. I know.
So this was the Liverpool scene. So we had news from nowhere. I mean, the animal rights group. We had an animal rights shop. We used to do stalls in the city centre as well. There was quite a lot of kind of anarchists in the group, and so they were the ones who opened the squat shop. But also one thing that they did was, this is a famous or infamous Liverpool block of flats called the Piggeries, of all things. And so they used to go and they would find the old age pensioners, because they had a machine which would send the electricity meter backwards. And the idea was to reduce their bills, because again, even back then, pensioners were having difficulty paying their bills. This is Manchester. Now, this is a squat that I was squatting here, and what you used to do here. This is the famous thing called the crescents. You can see even worse shot of them here. They're really notorious. They've been demolished now. But what you would do is you would break into them, and the squatters usually use the word crack. They would crack a house, and then what you would do, you go over to a place called Moss Side and say, we've just broken into a place in Hume, which is like a mile away, and they would give you the keys and the tenancy. and then part of this complex, there was flats which were just full of mattresses and furniture and all that kind of stuff. So you just went and picked it, and they would kind of help you kind of move in. And so it was a really kind of well organized thing. Although, as you can see, it was a very kind of run down place.
Yes.
I mean, look at the stairwell there in the bottom picture. There was no lifts. It was pretty dangerous at night time, as you can imagine, So that's Manchester. This was interesting because this is the famous factory, which is the same area, but this is the factory label that was started in Manchester, which was all part of that Britpop thing. And I was involved with a group called Anaglypta, and they won they were able to go into this place and cut a couple of tracks, which was pretty good. It was interesting because they overproduced it. They used to have this brilliant, very powerful reggae track, and they overproduced it, put strings on and everything, and it ended up really, really bland, which is a real shame. So this is a place called Grange Gorman, and so you can see the top picture. They had kind of a garden areas, but there was all kinds of things going on here. They had gigs, they had poetry readings, they had people, because there was some really big what would you call it? Almost like hangars, and there would be tree houses in there, lots of stuff going on. They used to organize letter writing campaigns to political prisoners around the world. I went to a couple of those. The bottom picture is when the police were just about moving in to do a forced eviction, which was big news in Dublin. So that's just a thing to support that. So Shamrock Spray was an autonomous social centre, as you can see there, but there's a lot of animal activities. So they had the first showing of earthlings there. We also secured, but this was in Trinity College, the kind of Irish premiere of Vegucated. I don't know if you remember that film, Ronnie, yes. But they also showed it here as well. And also the top left is the emotional world of farmed animals, which is a really interesting kind of documentary. I remember showing that there. So there's a lot going on. Again, a vegan cafe was in there, and so there was a lot going on. And then we get to the Barricade Inn. So the Barricade Inn was a complete social centre. This is a brilliant place. Top right, that's the vegan cafe that was there. You got an outside view. Bottom right, and then inside you had that brilliant kind of thing, and then you've got all these kind of adverts for the vegan calf, which were quite they use a lot of imagination. They use the internet a lot, but they also gave leaflets out and that kind of stuff. So we used to, when we were doing the street work for Vigo and VIP, we would go and get the food from there on a Saturday. So that was really good. This one's quite creative. This was part of the repeal thing when they were going through the abortion issue. So that was a famous banner that they had, read our lips, we demand choice. And then going back to your thing about rent is theft, Ronnie, but also you see the top left there, 76 empty houses for every single homeless person.
It's absolutely appalling because it's kind of not it's kind of not managed properly. And another thing that we get over here is this thing about greenfield sites and brownfield sites. Where there's this big thing about don't build on greenfield, don't build on like farmland, but build on brownfield sites that are like inner city areas that are kind of being gone derelict. But the problem is that you often have more wildlife on brownfield sites than you do on greenfield sites, because you get all kind of you get wild vegetation grow and they become inhabited by foxes and stuff like that. So these places, I think that if a building has to be demolished or a space cleared, that immediately that should go straight for housing and be built on straight away, so it doesn't get a chance for it to be colonized by wildlife that would then be destroyed when they decided eventually to build on it. And all that needs to be managed, and that can only be done through these things being it can't be done if all these things are privately owned. That can only be done through proper management and public ownership of housing.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's right. I mean, there's obviously a really interesting thing about green and brownfield sites, in the sense that which one does the least damage, which is what you're saying in terms of free living beings and stuff.
Yeah.
Obviously, disturbing a greenfield area is bad, but obviously, I suppose in the vegan world, any kind of building would be a lot slower and more careful than it is now. We wouldn't be just sending the bulldozers in and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but, absolutely. Because a lot of greenfield is just farmland that's been like sprayed. It's been sprayed to buggery, hasn't it? And so but
that's where you've got the problem then with the so-called rogue foxes and badgers, because that's their territory. That's their territory.
Yeah, they'd use that.
Meme,
go across saying, that. Absolutely.
This deer is not crossing a road. This road is crossing through their
deer
land.
Isn't crossing the road. The road is crossing the forest. Yeah, we've driven roads through their territory. That's their territory.
That's right.
It's like when people moan, or a badger come and dug up my garden or something. Well, who was there first? You or the badger? Well, the badger was there
that's
first.
Right. You like this one, Ronnie? You'll recognise the picture on the left.
Oh yes, yeah.
And then that was a picture of a vegan fridge that I took in a different place. So I'm just going to switch for a second to a 2-minute film Now, people might have difficulty with the Irish accents about this, but it brings up a couple of points that I want to raise. So I'll tell you what they said afterwards if you didn't get it the first time. So let's see if this works.
Welcome to the Barricade Inn, a squatted social centre right in the heart of Dublin on Parnell Street. We're going to talk to some of the people living and helping to run the space. So when people initially entered the building, what sort of state was it in?
It was like a bomb site. It was an absolute wreck. In the front cafe area, there was about 5 foot of rubble, concrete rubble in bags and bins, and basically every room was full of between 10 to 15 needles and general rubbish and boards over every of the windows. It was not habitable. There was dead pigeons everywhere. There was also in one of the rooms there had been an altered roof created to funnel water from a leak in the roof, which was quite clearly created by someone who wanted to wreck the building. The water was been funneled towards the stairways and into the wooden parts of the building to destroy it, as it is a protected building. And we have talked to individuals who have experience with this sort of thing, and it's basically a tactic to destroy a building, a protected building, so it can be knocked down and apartments built in its place, because they wouldn't get approval from the government unless the building was dangerous.
So one of the things you mentioned in there was people who'd been evicted from other occupied buildings. I mean, there's been a wave of occupations and evictions over the summer. Probably Grange Gorman is the one that people would know about because it got lots of publicity, but as we've been covering in Solidarity Times, there's actually been a whole string of those. And one of the things that strikes you is how many of these buildings are quite close to each other. Like, it's quite a small area. So, there's this claim that the housing shortage we have is due to a lack of buildings, and the government is saying, we have to start giving out more grants to developers and making it easier for them to invest. But the reality we've seen even in central Dublin is that there's loads of places that are not only empty, but like here have been deliberately left empty.
Yeah, so there's a couple of really interesting points there that I want to raise. So the first one was that when they initially cracked into the Barricade Inn, which had been derelict for about 15 years, they found that the place was in a right mess. But one of the things that had been done is that there was a leak in the roof, but somebody had organised a kind of funnel system to bring the water onto the stairways deliberately. And what they're saying there is that the idea was that this building was protected. And so developers had done that in order to try and ruin the inside and get it condemned as dangerous, in order then to be able to demolish it to build a block of flats. Because if it was in good standing, even if it was derelict or empty, they wouldn't be able to do that. So that's one kind of trick that they get up to. And you've got a take on this, Ronnie.
Yeah, there was a guy on my first prison sentence. There was a guy in the same prison as me that I got to know and chatted with. And he was doing a 4-year sentence for arson. And he only got 4 years, I think, because he'd never been in any trouble with the law before. But what he was doing, he was paid by property developers to burn places down so that it'd be easier for them to then, build a new place there, places maybe that had a preservation order on or something like that. And he was actually, he was short of money, and they kind of, used him to be their arsonist.
Yeah, that's incredible. The second point is one, when you saw the Grange Gorman thing, which is all the kind of heavies and the police, they kind of pinned the squatters in order for them not to be able to get to the rest of the squat and everything, and then they started dismantling it and all. It was saying that the Barricade Inn and Grange Gorman were fairly close together, and there's loads of places like that which are just lying there empty for years and years and years, and yet the government are making it easier for developers to develop greenfield sites. And again, destroying free living other animals, whereas there's loads of places for various reasons, and all to do with money, of course.
Yeah, and it'll be the same it's certainly the same here in the UK, and it's going to be the same, in cities all over the world. The same thing's going to repeat itself because of the profit motive.
Yeah. I mean, it's just got to be taken out of the of that in terms of.
It has to be public. Housing should all be publicly owned, ideally, and we need to move towards that situation. Obviously, that would be a gradual move. It's dismantling the existing system and replacing it with something else. But I think morally that's what we need to do.
Yeah, this is just a bit of squat art that I just thought I'd show people, but I'll zip through it. It's really lovely stuff. So if you want to see this at your leisure, the best thing to do is probably watch the recording and then so these are scenes from various Dublin squats, including the Barricade Inn. That one's not the Barricade Inn, but it's somewhere else. Riots Not Diets.
Riots Not Diets. No,
or
Riots and Diets, maybe. Or,
the one on the left is good. Man's, which is an interesting use of the old-fashioned term there. Man's worst enemy and proud of it. So
in fact, I'd sooner see change come about without riots. I think riots, people are injured.
Right.
Yes,
we're into your section, Ronnie. So
what happened? What this is all about? This is a sticker that myself and other people used to go around in London sticking on army recruitment offices and any military vehicles we might come across, like at kind of these kind of sort of arms fairs and these things where you get the military in in like a open shopping place where they got the tanks there and all of that, and the military vehicles there encouraging little children to kind of climb up on them, trying to so that one day that these little kids would join the army and go off somewhere and kill other people and quite likely be killed themselves. And so because what happened was, like, not too long after I became a vegan and got involved in the animal liberation movement, I also got involved in the peace movement. And some
people would say that they're the same thing.
Yes, I mean there's obviously a close relationship, because the main victims of war aren't wars started by humans or started by certain humans. The main victims of war aren't humans; they're other animals. They're animals. That free living beings. Wildlife, or they're animals that have been domesticated by humans. They get killed in massive numbers in wars. They're the kind of main victims. The destruction of the environment. Of the habitat of animals caused by war is like horrendous. And these are wars started by humans, and this is something that kind of a lot of people don't realise. Why all vegans should be absolutely opposed to war and absolutely be like opposed to the military for that reason, let alone the harm that's done to humans.
Another group that's often not thought about in terms of war are women, and depending on the war you're talking about, obviously, I mean some plights of groups of women have been horrendous, especially when you've got as it became clear when you got ethnic cleansing and stuff, and Rwanda, these kind of ideas. You had a situation where mass rape became a weapon of war, and so that was an appalling situation too.
And the ridiculousness of you have these different states that go to war against each other, and what people need to realise is that nation states are a totally false construct that created by violence, where some lord or king or tough guy has said, right, I'm going to use violence and force to claim this area.
All boundaries are like that, aren't they? I mean,
all boundaries are like that.
It goes back to the World Cup.
There should be no borders. One world, one people. All these borders are totally constructs. Nothing natural about them.
You can see that if you look at a picture of the states and look at the different states. I mean, some of the ones are just like straight lines.
Yes,
I mean, just somebody drawing lines on a map.
That doesn't mean you don't have administrative areas, for the sake of organisation. I mean, we have counties, we have county councils, don't we, and town councils and all that, for administration. That but there's no borders involved in that. It's just in order to be able to organise society. I think the whole world should be like that. You'd have to have administrative areas for organisation, but there shouldn't be borders. There shouldn't be nation states that somehow feel that they're opposed to one another, because it's where wars come, isn't it? Between wars,
you have no borders, but only squatters. That's what you want, Ronnie.
Well, ideally, yes. But another thing, I mean, coming quickly on to the last one, that the peace movement.
Go back to that?
I was actually. There was a group of us. We got there was an organisation called the British Withdrawal from Northern Ireland Campaign, which was opposed to the imperialist occupation of the north of Ireland by Britain. And what we were, the aim was to kind of, we wanted a military withdrawal from Northern Ireland, and basically we were giving information to soldiers about how they could leave the army and going around to military establishments, like army bases and that, giving these leaflets. It was a leaflet called Some Information for Discontented Soldiers. If soldiers were unhappy about being in the army, about the happy about the role of the British Army in Northern Ireland in particular, how they could leave, the different ways they could leave the army. I got arrested, myself and another guy were at a military base in Oswestry, and we got arrested. We actually got put in the guard room. So I've not only been in prison cells and police cells, I've been in a guard room, and then the police came and interviewed us and let us go. But eventually there were 14 of us put on trial for this, for something called incitement to disaffection. In other words, like you're inciting soldiers to leave the army, but we got acquitted. It went on for about 6 weeks, this trial at the Old Bailey it was, and it's the only time I've ever been acquitted of anything. So I got acquitted, but I was in prison.
Is it true, Ronnie, that you're so old that the first time you got arrested you were put in stocks?
Yeah, that rot. But yeah, it was so long ago. Yes.
Yeah.
yeah. I got.
Right. I'm just looking at the time. So let's press on a bit.
But yes, now that's a band that I was involved in. Total Attack, a punk band in the late 70s. We were involved in the Rock Against Racism movement, and we did some gigs for Rock Against Racism. Obviously, a lot of our stuff was animal liberation. It related, but we were kind of wider than that. We were very into social justice. We were going at the time when the tragic day in this country when Margaret Thatcher was elected as Prime Minister, and we actually wrote a song about that and how terrible that was.
Indeed.
We were very political, mainly for animal liberation, but also, social justice as well.
Well, again, I think that goes back to focus and scope, because I always tell the story that, we would go sabbing on a Saturday, you go to a demo or maybe a raid or something less legal on a Sunday, but then during the week you'd be on a Rock Against Racism gig, or you'd be doing a Reclaim the Night march, and so all of those things weren't seen as a problem, and so that goes back to the kind of intersectional history of our own movement, really.
Absolutely. We didn't really see that distinction, and it very much was that the case with us. Most of the stuff we did was.
But it doesn't mean that you can't focus on something. That's one thing that a lot of critics miss, is though you've got to kind of either give equal time, or someone's got the right to say, don't do this instead. Well, no, you can choose what you want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of what and of course, the punk movement was very much like that as well. And we were obviously involved in that.
Indeed. Should I move on?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, right. This is kind of a little bit more up to date. I kind of became, I don't know how long ago it was, 15 to 20 years ago. I became involved in the Green Party. I saw them as the best political party for both animal liberation and social justice. I was very involved in my local Green Party. The picture on the left, we had a campaign. The county council were going to cut some bus services or not provide funding for certain bus services. We collected signatures on a petition. In fact, different groups throughout the county collected signatures on a petition to try to stop this, to try to stop the bus cuts. And I also saw this as an animal liberation issue. I see public transport as an animal liberation issue because, the number of other animals that suffer and die, first of all, because of the emissions from cars, from private transport. And secondly, directly through impacts on the roads. We have, I think it's estimated 40 million birds killed a year by motor vehicles, 100,000 foxes, 50,000 badgers, etc., deer, all sorts of other animals. So if we can reduce the number of cars on the road by improving public transport, that's a kind of win-win. It's a win for people. It's a win for other animals. And so, this is why supporting public transport to me is part of the animal liberation struggle. And I
going back
saw
to
this
squatting, it probably should be free too. Just jump on, jump off.
Yeah, just and it should be free. Yeah, that's another thing. That should be free as well. Transport, it should be free, so that and that would be a great way of getting people out of their cars and to use public transport. If you've got great
I
services,
think they might have experimented with those things in some countries, haven't they?
Yes, they have, and I mean the rich will have to be taxed more, but fucking tax them more. You know what I mean? Why are some people filthy rich while other people are like starving and nowhere to live? That's just totally wrong. It's disgusting. Tax these people. They should pay. Who needs more to live than what you actually need? And so there we are.
Paul from Galway is saying that you looked a little bit like,
Rick. Yeah, yeah, maybe. But there we are. That was presenting the petition, and what happened? It was a partial success. They withdrew the cuts on some of the services, and so that petition was it was a partial success in maintaining some of the bus service. The one on the right, once again, this is our county council against the public, cuts in public services, cuts to social care and stuff like that, because unfortunately we got like Tory dominated county council. They'll make cuts that harm people.
It looks like it was pretty cold on that one, Ronnie.
And they're big into anything that is in favour of the private car. They'll support that and make cuts elsewhere. They'll won't allow bicycle racks and stuff, but they'll do stuff that helps.
It's some more cuts.
This was the one on the left is that was a demonstration in Birmingham there with Louise. Will Duckworth on the right, the guy on the right with the sunglasses. At the time, he was a deputy leader of the Green Party, and that was against in solidarity with public service workers who were on strike, because we got they weren't being, because of course their wages fundamentally come from the government, and the government wasn't paying them enough, and their wages were going down in comparison with the private sector. So that was why we went and supported that. Do
you regret your time with the Greens, though, Ronnie? No.
Well, you see how I kind of look at it. Is that my problem with the Greens is the lack. The Greens have got great policies on things. Certainly, the Greens here in the Green Party of England and Wales, the one here, they've got great policies. I mean, they've got great policies on social justice, great policies for the environment, great policies, for protecting animals. One of their policies is they want to move agriculture to totally plant-based. That's one of their actual policies, right? And they ban all animal experiments, ban all hunting, everything. They're really good. But the trouble is they give no priority. You wouldn't know they had those policies. They give no priority to the animal protection policies at all.
It'd be difficult though, wouldn't it? I mean, the Greens in Ireland are hopeless, but then the farming lobby in Ireland is really strong, but it's pretty strong in Britain, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, but it's to do with because they are human centric. They're still human centric, despite these good policies.
What about subsidies? Is there any talk about subsidising the farmers to transition?
Yeah, I think that would be all part of their policy. I mean, their policy is really quite in line with what Animal Rebellion are asking for. It'd be great, but you wouldn't know. They don't ever. When you hear one of them talk, they hardly ever mention animals. What is the greatest horror in the world? It's the oppression of other animals. You've got 50 million animals dying every second. You've got 8 billion animals killed every year to feed the UK population. So that should be number one priority. That's the most horrific thing that's kind of happening. That was happening to humans. Just think of the stink that would be kicked up. After some time in the Green Party and being involved, I set up a group within the Green Party called Greens for Animal Protection, which was, a big part of that was to educate, people in the Green Party to go vegan. Really, that we did really a lot of that at conferences where we were giving out vegan stuff to people and that. But you see, I came to the conclusion that that's not going to change. They're still human centric. They're still human supremacist. We've got all the parties are human supremacists, really, apart from maybe some of the small sort of animal protection parties. You're not going to change that until we get more vegans. Until you've got to create more vegans and have more vegans involved in politics, which you'll get if you create more vegans, before any of that will change. So my focus is really on that. I'm kind of looking at it at a more fundamental level, and I still help my local Green Party a little bit, but I'm much more involved.
I mean, the culture's got to change before.
Yeah, the culture's got to change, and that
we
changes
know that.
by vegan education. So that's my focus, because you've got.
I'm just going to move this on. So this is
that was once again the same thing against the in support of the public sector strikers, but that was in Worcester. That was outside the Guildhall. The one on the left is a march against the Tory party conference in Birmingham, and that you can see that badger that the badger, the placard, but Louise is there in a wheelchair just as a badger. And what we do, we give,
she looks like she's facing both ways there.
She's kind of, I think it got a little bit too hot with that badger head over her face. But we'd go there and we'd have vegan leaflets to give them out to the other protesters, because people would come up to us and go, "Oh, what's this?" Because her placard says "Cull the Tories, not the badgers." That's the placard that Louise is holding there. The one on the right, that's more recent, 2018. Donald Trump came over here a couple of times. He was invited over to this country, and on both occasions there were big marches in London. We went to both of them, and this is one of them. And that's Louise and I and Tom and another guy from our local vegan group. We went on the march, as you say, angry vegans against Trump.
Louise has got a bit of a rude banner.
Louise has got something that says "fuck off" on it, I think, obviously aimed at Donald Trump. But there was some hilarious. I mean, it was brilliant. So, some of the placards were absolutely brilliant. There was one that said "Don't comb over here."
Oh dear.
Tiny hands, huge arsehole was another one, because he had little hands, didn't he? Donald Trump still has. And so it was quite amusing reading some of the clever placards.
Unless he has a hand transplant in case he gets back into power.
A hand transplant, Been involved more recently, although through lack of time and various things, I kind of I tend to be much more focused on the vegan outreach these days. But one thing I've been very involved in is disability rights, and because they estimate, it's been estimated that in the last decade, 250,000 people, mainly disabled people with disabilities and other health problems, have died because of Tory policies, because of the cuts in benefits, cuts in social services, cuts in healthcare. And they've taken a lot for people with disabilities. They made this move that resulted in a lot of them losing benefits. And I've been very involved in kind of helping people to fight and appeal and get their benefits back. And that's one thing that I kind of still continue to do today, because I kind of, I had a bit of legal training back in the past. My first job was in the solicitor's office, and that's kind of helped me do that. So that
was back in Luton, wasn't it? That's when
that was way back in Luton. So that's the main thing I do now, apart from the apart from the animal liberation stuff. I do.
You've had a lot of connection with the legal system one way or another, haven't you, Ronnie?
Yeah, it seems to be. Yeah, it's something that seems to have haunted me through the years. The legal system. Right? So I was on one side of the law, and then I went the other side. But it's still useful. I still find that
you've seen it from both sides. Yeah.
It makes you think in a certain way. The legal training, and that's going to help with kind of helping people fight. And I've kind of, because they've cut all the people that would normally give people assistance, like the Citizens Advice Bureau, they've been subject to government cuts. So they cut people's benefits, and they cut the means by which people can fight to get those benefits back. So it's down to individuals in often cases that have got some special knowledge or abilities to help people. And that's kind of,
you're a real insider, Ronnie.
A real insider. Yeah. I certainly have been
in one way or another. Yeah.
So that's and we've also taken part in News 9 demonstrations against the cuts in benefits, and they brought private companies in, you see, to sort of interview people and find ways of taking their benefits away. So once again, it's involved in these private companies, and the more benefits they can take off people, that probably the more they'll get paid by the government. So it's all once
probably
again,
would, yeah. So we're a couple of minutes from the mighty Skyjack Morgan. Let me just rush through a couple of things. This is a climate thing in Dublin, but this one is interesting because Dublin activists did a lot of protests against various things involving with Russian. But I was interested in that bottom one there because people are saying, "Oh, you're talking about Kuwait, but you don't talk about when the World Cup was at Russia." But there was a protest about that.
Yeah, there was.
Which I think, and then this one is really good because if you remember the Pussy Riot situation,
absolutely,
right.
yes, yeah.
And so we did that. Yeah, Putin, don't be a dick. Some of them got 2 years. Kind of
You've got to hope that
YouTube
people
about
in
Pussy
Russia
Riot.
will kind of overthrow Putin and have a. And yeah, this is another thing. The Kurds, of course, and in some places the Kurds are very, very radical. They've set up real kind of, because there was a young woman from Bristol, wasn't there, went to fight for the Kurds. She was a Hunt Sab.
That's right, yeah.
And was killed because some of them are like some of their societies are very, very progressive and kind of run along kind of socialist stroke anarchist lines, very progressive.
Well, the Catholic Church is a criminal organisation. You can't really argue with that. This is one thing that I was involved in. In fact, I've got a film of this. So this is the Benetton. Well, it was a big kind of clothing sweatshop that was in Bangladesh. So some activists in Dublin occupied the United Colours of Benetton because they were holding out against paying compensation.
Yes,
more than 1,000 people had died. It's seen as one of the biggest problems of its type ever. There's all these clothing manufacturers using Bangladesh because it was the cheapest place for wages. And so they had almost like a tower block. It was like a sweatshop, but it was also a tower block. So, it was kind of floor after floor after floor. And the goddamn place collapsed.
Yeah.
They said that the manager of the entire building ignored the fact that somebody told them the day before this happened that cracks had appeared in the walls and stuff. And then, but the clothing operatives, or whatever you want to call them, they were told to go back to work the next day, and then at lunchtime this happened. And then the picture of the woman on the stretcher, that was like 17 days after the disaster. So she was the last one who was kind of pulled out alive of this situation. This has been a bit unusual for us because in the sense that we've kind of looked at scopy things rather than focusy things. So we hope you enjoy that. It's a bit of a diversion. We'll be back to the focus, I'm sure, next time.
We'll be back next Monday with another very interesting topic. And so hopefully people will tune in at the same time, or if they can't tune in live, it's recorded and they can still see it on YouTube. Sky's channel's the best place to watch it on YouTube.
Okay, people, you take care and we'll see you again, yeah?
Take care, everyone. See you next week. Bye.